Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Queerness Diaries. So, today I'm joined by a very special guest, Stephen Joyce. So, hello, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm great, Connor. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, very happy to have you on. And so, I think today's podcast is a really important one because not only is it talking about coming out and family dynamics, but also your story is very inspiring, and I think it will help a lot of people. And it's a really important one to get out there because I think for all of us in the queer community, we have different experiences with coming out and life journeys and ups and downs and navigating with families and the pressure and the worry, and it can be, at any point. Like for me, I was 17 when I initially came out, went back in the closet, and then came out
hmm
again around 10 years later. And obviously, your story is very different. So, of course,
hmm
I want to give you the floor to get into your story whenever you feel comfortable. And yes, so as much as you would like to share, you've had the floor, and I think it's a really amazing story.
Well, I appreciate that. I think as I was going through the experience, I wasn't really thinking too much about is this a an interesting story or not. I think it was um, I've discovered now that there's a number of men in my position that have probably gone through something similar. And for a lot of us, we just don't talk about it. So, just for context, I'm turning 52 this year. I grew up in the 80s and early 90s as a
Yeah,
as a teenager. So during a time when we remember Margaret Thatcher
yeah,
and Ronald Reagan being the people that they were,
oh yeah,
and how much anti LGBTQ rhetoric was being spewed at the time. The AIDS crisis was in full thrust, and it was not a great time to be anything other than straight.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I also grew up I went to an all boys school, so surrounded by misogyny, by toxic masculinity, and any sort of appearance of being even slightly, feminine or effeminate or anything like that would get you ridiculed and bullied. So,
mm,
um, as a when I was in school, drama was something that I was very good. I mean, looking in hindsight, there
mm.
were so many clues.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I sort of followed like all of the sort of stereotypical,
yeah.
gay kid things. So I was big into drama. I loved arts. I was not very good at sports. I was, all of those sorts of
Same,
things.
same. Yeah.
And so looking, I did drag in high school, for example. We did in grade 12, we did an all male production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and I played the two lead female roles, Hippolyta and Titania. So
Oh, awesome.
I was
Oh,
literally Queen of the Fairies in grade 12. So that
oh,
should have
that's
been
amazing. Oh, that's
should have
so
been a
cool.
clue,
Yeah.
but but obviously it wasn't. It was just like, oh no, that's just me being dramatic. So anyway, so fast forward a few years, I met my uh, who would the person that would eventually become my wife, um, and we met very early. I was only 20, and so we were together for almost just over 5 years before we decided to get married, because that felt like the right thing to do. That's sort of the standard heteronormative playbook, right?
Yeah.
We got married. The old saying, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in a baby carriage, and we pretty much follow, pretty much followed that playbook because that's what we were expected to do. And that, for me, having, not a religiously conservative but I would say to some degree a socially conservative family. Just given the time period too, that was the expected thing to do. So,
Mm.
um, and at every step of that way, like when I met my wife, I knew I was attracted to men already,
Yeah.
and I had told her at the time, this was in the 90s, that I was probably bi, that I and that was fine because I was now with my forever person. And so if I was bi, that was okay because, you
Yeah.
know, that fit with with the bi romantic component of it. So it seemed fine. What I realized is that as I moved further along in that journey, every step that I took moved me further and further away from that part of me that I realized was
Mm.
gay.
Mm.
So, getting married was like, okay, that takes me for that path started to diverge. And it took me further away from, could I follow that path of being gay now? No, it took me further away. And then when
Yeah.
I took it, when my son was born, that was like, okay, another step further away, because now that adds added complexity, right? And
Yeah.
then my second child was born. That was again further. And
Mm.
then once you get into parenthood and you're in a family dynamic where all of your attention is spent, so much of your attention is spent on the kids, and making sure of their well-being, and continuing to move that family forward. And we had our own crises within the family, um, that I won't, medical issues and things that we had to deal with, that
Mm.
again kind of it took focus off me, and my seemingly selfish issues,
Mm.
and forced me to have to focus on the family. And that was okay. I you know
Yeah.
um that was what was important at the time. um, what I realized when I turned 40 is that I wasn't happy with where I was in my life. I didn't feel good about myself. My health was not great. And I started to, I uh, took on a fitness journey, which changed the way that my body felt,
Yeah.
and also changed just my perception of myself. And I started to realize that I was starting to get attention from people, like,
Yeah.
in terms of like compliments and things like that, and that felt really good.
Mm.
And um, I realized that because at the time I was traveling a lot,
Mm.
when I traveled, I was away from home and away from the people that had all of these expectations of who I am, that I
Yeah.
could be in spaces when I traveled that were more akin to who I wanted to be, right? So I
Yeah.
gravitated to queer spaces when I traveled. I made friends with queer people when I traveled. Most of my friends in the community when I travel are queer, either gay or lesbian, or some form of the rainbow, because they're the people that I naturally gravitated to. They were the
Yeah.
the, the ones that I felt more connected to. um, and so that continued for a time, and that became part of the way that I coped with having almost two paths, right? Like I had my life at home, which was very, very straight Steve, and sports dad Steve, who would take
Mm.
his kids to basketball and do all those sorts of regular things.
Yeah.
And then there was gay Steve. When I traveled, I got to express myself in a way that was more comfortable for me, and I got to be with the people that I wanted to be with and be in spaces that were more sort of aligned with who I, and that brought me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that I was more joyful when I was in those spaces and surrounded by those people than
Yeah.
I was when I was at home with my family. And it was because I couldn't share with my family the joy that I felt when I was away, because I felt like that was a betrayal of who I was with
Mm.
them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I couldn't share that part of how I express myself with them, because that was not normal, quote unquote, or
Mm.
appropriate, right? So during COVID is when it really, really hit me, and um, because I couldn't travel, I didn't have that outlet anymore. I didn't have those friends that I could be around. I didn't have those spaces that I could, I couldn't go to the drag shows and just be surrounded by that.
Yeah.
And so when I was home, I felt like half of me was gone,
Yeah.
and all that I was trapped in this place where I was not happy.
Yeah.
So during COVID, that was really tough. I really suffered, emotionally, mentally. I became quite depressed during that time, although at in the moment, I probably wouldn't have described it as depression. Now, looking back at it and having gone through therapy,
Mm.
which I highly recommend to everyone, by the way,
Yeah.
especially older, especially Gen Xers and older folks who were kind of taught as children to just push those emotions deep inside and bury them, and
Mm.
just carry on, keep calm and carry on. Right? We all know
Mm.
that saying. It doesn't
Indeed.
work.
Yeah.
Therapy. You need
Yeah.
therapy. Therapy's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So um,
So true.
so I realized that the only way I was going to be able to continue was to bring those two parts of me together, because what I realized I was doing, and the biggest betrayal to my family, was that when I was away, I didn't really talk about my family, because I was in those queer spaces and surrounded by queer people. It's not very common for a gay man to ask another gay man, "Hey, how are your wife and kids?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the topic really never came up. I
Mm.
mean, if it did, then I would talk about it. But it very, very rarely came up. And so, in a lot of ways, I erased them from that part of my life,
Yeah.
in the same way that I erased the experiences that I was having when I traveled in my everyday life. And so I was forcibly like erasing parts of my experience from the two parts of my uh, life that were the most important to me. And I just couldn't continue to do that. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring that joy that I felt when I traveled and when I was in those. And it wasn't because I was traveling, it was because I was being more authentic with myself. I wanted to bring that joy of authenticity to my everyday life with my wife and kids. And that meant being honest with who I was.
Yeah.
And it really kind of came to fruition it came to fruition last summer, um,
Mm.
when I basically had to admit that who I am and what I am, and continue from there, and then proceed. And um, what I have to say is that part of part of that journey, and part of the approach that that I took, and that my ex
Yeah.
and my kids have always taken, is one of, and whenever we've dealt with a crisis, has
Mm.
always been um, starting from a place of love.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't speak for every family situation, because the dynamics are different everywhere, but I we found that when we came from that standpoint, and because we had kind of established that as our sort of modus operandi when we were dealing with things, is that we always start from a place of love. Is that when this, when I came out and said this is the situation, um, it was, that there were tears, there was sadness, there was, because of the change in, it meant a change for our family. Our family was never going to be the same again. Um, but it didn't mean that our family wasn't still a family, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the way
Yeah.
that we approach it, is that the family that I have is the family that I chose. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I understand completely.
So approaching it from that standpoint meant that the love was still there. It was just different moving
Mm.
forward. And to have that level of support from your family when you're going through something like that is, um I mean, I feel so blessed to be able to, um continue to have an amazing relationship with my ex and my kids. That's not to say that it's not going to take work to
Yeah.
continue to build that relationship and to have that relationship, but again, because we're coming from the standpoint of love, it means that those other emotions that we feel, the sadness and the anger and the frustration and those sorts of things, are tempered immediately, right? Like we didn't
Yeah.
start with anger. If you start with anger, it's very hard to pull back from anger. But if
Yeah.
you start with love and then you feel anger, you know, as on the periphery, you can always come back to love. It's hard to come back to love when you start with anger or sadness. And that was really kind of the really the key takeaway for me with this is that we continue to move forward, understanding that we all still have a lot of love for each other, and that's what we use as our anchor.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And also, the fact that now fully you get to open up about, a key part of your life that's so important to them and share something, at your most authentic self, that it's like I can imagine like the weight of the baggage going and all the freedom. It must have been such a release. Like even I don't know how you felt even like the morning after or the moments after, but it must have felt like such an enormous like just release. And
Yeah,
yeah.
it just felt like I didn't have to hide anything anymore, right? I mean, the the whole idea of having to having to do things in secret, or having to be cautious about who I spent time with, right? I mean, I didn't have friends in my hometown for
Yeah.
until this past summer. Really, I didn't have a lot of friends because the people that I wanted to spend time with were not the people that I could spend time with, because if I did, I could have potentially been outed, right?
Yeah.
So how can
Yeah.
I have a lot of gay if all my friends in Vancouver were gay, people would be suspecting something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But now pretty much all my friends are gay, so it's
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not an
So
issue, because
yeah.
that's it is what it is. So so that yeah, I mean, the level of joy that I've been able to experience as a result of just being unburdened with this has been tremendous. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I've had so many I smile more than I ever have before. I laugh more than I have before. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoy spending time with people, much more social than I was before. Trying new things, experiencing new things with people, different
Yeah.
sports, different activities, like just being open to trying new things, because I don't have to ask myself, if I do this thing, are people going to question whether or not I'm gay,
Yeah.
right?
100%. Yeah.
And
and
now
you
I don't
can,
care. It's like, yeah,
yeah, it's like,
I belong
yeah,
to a queer dodgeball league. It's very gay
yeah, that's awesome.
and it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, and you can tell it just it kind of radiates off you like with your energy, and you can just and it's, I mean, as hard as it's been, and it's still pretty recent, really. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like
It's
so
less than a
recent.
year. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
less than a year.
yeah, it's like still pretty recent, but it's like, I can't compare to the story in that way, but I definitely remember when I was 18 sneaking off on the train to London, and that was my only glimpse into a bit of gay life. And then I had to go, back home, and it was like
Mm,
put on the straight face because I'd gone back in the closet, and I would hang on to those little memories or personas that I put on when I was well, not personas because I could be like my self, but I didn't really know who I was at the time. And so I got very nostalgic, even at a young age, over those sort of memories. And then when I finally came out officially in Madrid for the second time, I was like, okay, this time there's no, there's going to be no holding back, no barriers, like to everyone around me, everyone in my life. Um, I was just very open and honest and said to, my mom, my sister, my father, I never had a good relationship with, but everyone at the same time, I have a boyfriend, I'm gay, and either you accept it or you don't, but I'm living my life authentically now in Madrid, and well, I have done ever since. And
hmm.
even in work, like the same way you say the fear of being outed, it can be so much sometimes. Like I remember specifically for myself that I used to have, for example, on Grinder a blank profile, but when I
Mm,
went on vacation, maybe I'd put a picture, and I had forgot to change it back when I got back to my hometown. And someone from my workplace popped up like, "Oh, hi, Connor. I didn't know you were gay." And so I felt like I had to be best friends with this person, even though we weren't close. And otherwise, he would out me to everyone in a very
right.
homophobic work environment. And so once I released it all, I was, I think, 26, 27 at the time in Madrid. It was just like such a weight lifted. And it's like, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter the moment that you release it, it's just like you start to feel like that joy in your life, and everything just starts, connecting and feeling more vibrant. And it's like, yeah, you're still going to have difficult days, and some days are going to be much harder than others. But
Yeah.
I think it's it's been such a, like, the transition I can imagine over the last year, like the joy that you felt, and just being able to just fully be open and not feel like, you've got to carry any sort of secret, and you can be 100%
Hmm.
authentic self is just such a liberating feeling.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And even at work too, when I did come out, I came out to my two bosses
Yeah.
at the company that I joined actually shortly before I came out. So new
Yeah.
job, and it was a bit of a transit, but I'd known them for a long time, and they were both very supportive. In fact, one of them was like, I didn't even know you had a wife and kids."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like, well, that's how separated I managed to keep the two
yeah,
worlds. But they've been super supportive, and um part of, I guess, part of what I want to do now, part of my mandate for myself moving forward is that I want to see more representation
yeah,
in the space. Like there's we don't see enough, we don't see enough queer joy
yeah.
in
So
the
true.
workplace.
Yeah,
And it doesn't have to be overt. It just has to be authentic, right? It just has to, I just want to see people being able to be who they are without the fear of of, repercussions because of who they are. Um, and I know that's not true for so many workplaces. I mean, you just described being in a homophobic workplace, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to see all spaces just be spaces that are comfortable for everyone,
Yeah.
regardless. And
Yeah.
we're a long way away from that, but it starts with having people, and I feel very privileged to be in a position where I am in a leadership position, right? I am
Yeah.
in an executive position, so I can be, in some ways, I can take some of those risks and be that person, that representation in not just my company, but in my industry. I can be that representation without too much fear of consequence, because I have built a reputation for myself and a brand for myself over the years that is trusted. And so, I can wear nail
Yeah.
polish and have a silly mustache and tattoos and be a little bit, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not particularly effeminate, but, I
Yeah.
definitely, I have a dramatic side to me.
Yeah.
um,
That's awesome.
and uh, and I will use that as much as I can to help make people realize that it doesn't matter how you present yourself. It's the content of your character and your ability to do what you say you will do, that is really the most important, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things I really appreciated in my current position that I'm in now is the trainer on the first day asked which pronouns we preferred to be
Hmm.
used by, and that sort of set a precedent for a good impression from day one in the company. And I used to, because I have ADHD as well, it wasn't, it sort of, my experience in the UK, obviously, I had hid my sexuality in work. And I had bad experiences in Madrid where sometimes, some of the students I worked with were already 18 and on Grinder. I had a
Mm.
very unfortunate incident where, you know, student managed to find me who was already 18 on Grindr and spread it around the whole school, and it became a big incident. And I felt like as a teacher I was facing the sort of bullying that I was scared of facing when I was in school at 15 if I came out weirdly
Hmm.
10 years later. And so when I arrived to Barcelona, and sort of from it sort of cascaded from the moment once I came out to my family. I just became more and more free. But I decided I really had to find a workplace that I felt is very inclusive. And the workplace I'm in now has all the wonderful, colors of the rainbow, and everyone is their full authentic selves. And that is more important for me than the position, the salary, like the freedom to go into work and
Hmm.
be my most authentic self and not feel like, am I going to be judged for my ADHD or for my queerness? Is It's such a relief, because it's something, we're always going to face certain judgments on the outside world, outside the workplace, but
Hmm.
your workplace is, for many of us, it's where we spend the majority of our time other than with our families. And
Yeah.
it could be like 40 hours or more for a lot of people out of the week. And so to work in an inclusive environment, and, I think the push, and hopefully more and more of these places do that, it always makes me happy when I see on a job application now that they have the pronouns, and they
Hmm.
have become more inclusive. And definitely, I've noticed here in Spain, there's a very positive shift over the last sort of year or so, especially, which has been great.
Yeah. I mean, it. sadly, that's not true everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm lucky. I live in Canada and specifically in British Columbia, which is also a very progressive province, even within Canada. So, we have a lot of protections
Yeah.
for individuals. Our human rights code, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms have sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as protected categories. So, from an employment standpoint, across Canada, there's no question about being discriminated against, with those things. It's just kind of baked in. The expectation is that you don't discriminate based on those things. That's very different in other places like the U.S.,
Yeah.
where you can legally discriminate against people. People can still, in certain states in the U.S., you can still be fired for being gay, like that. And then we see all of the anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ bills that are being passed in states across the U.S. that specifically target an already marginalized group. Right? It
Yeah.
feels like there's a lot of backsliding right now, and for me, it feels a little bit like it was in the 80s and 90s, like the same rhetoric that we're hearing about trans people, that they're targeting people in bathrooms, that they're trying to convert children. All of those things were the
Yeah.
same things that were said about gay people in the 80s.
Yeah.
um, and which is really disconcerting. At the same time, now that I'm more mature, now that I've had the life experience that I have, and I'm out, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take that shit from you. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I
Exactly. Yeah.
like you kept me in the closet long enough with that crap back in the 80s and 90s. That's not going to happen now. And
Yeah.
whatever I can do to help you know move companies, move individuals, change minds, change hearts, whatever it takes to get people to realize that people like you and I are just people. We just want to
Yeah.
live. We just want to love the people that we want to love. We want to have the families that we want to have. And
Yeah.
how does that impact anybody else except for us? Like,
Yeah. It's so
you know?
true. Yeah. 100%. It's so true. And yeah, I think eventually, you reach the point of inner peace where, like, it was so important to me when I was, I don't know, even 25 in the gay community of Madrid. Um, like I wasn't even in the queer space then. I was just solely focused on, I had never lived my, you know, life freely until then, and I tried to immerse myself in this gay community, and I found it could be, even in the community, pretty harsh sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like the expectations, the judgments, like I felt like I had to have a certain body type and all this stuff. And as the years have gone by, and I started to, back even from a young age, like my best friend since I was 11. She is lesbian and she's living her best life now in the US, but we were always bonded super close, and that didn't change when I moved to Madrid. But it took me a while in Madrid to go from wanting to be sort of not popular in the gay community. It's like I felt like because I'd lost so many years from sort of 16, 17 to 25 when I'd come out and gone back in the closet. I wanted this group of you know, the attention from gay men and the validation
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah.
And then as I became more and more confident with myself, which I'm still on a journey on, and getting, in Barcelona, there's a lot more queer friendly spaces. In Madrid, it's very focused towards gay men. There's only one lesbian bar, for example. In
Mm.
Barcelona, they have amazing like drag bars. They have really amazing queer spaces, safe spaces for everyone, and it's so much more open. And so
Hmm.
that has allowed me to meet a whole new variety of people that in Madrid, I it was very difficult, when you're just on Grinder and you
Hmm.
kind of just going to school and just seeing the same gay clubs, and a lot of them, what I really did not like in Madrid, um, if I was going to a gay club, often they would not let someone else in. So if they were trans, if they were women, for example, it was like
Hmm.
you can't come in, like that door policy. And in Barcelona, it's completely different. It's not like that, but everywhere it's obviously
Interesting.
very different. So
Yeah.
here in Barcelona, that's one thing why I feel so settled in the city, because I feel like specifically here it's such an openly queer, safe space. But in
Hmm.
Madrid, it's great for the gay community, and in my hometown, it's great for the straight community. But it's kind of like it's difficult to be. Even now, if I go back home, I notice everyone on Grindr blank profile. It's still this,
Yeah.
even though it's 2024 and it's the UK, everyone thinks the UK is still open. It's a small town. People are still
I don't
afraid.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That conservatism still exists, especially in the small towns. It's interesting because I've had kind of a crash course into into
Yeah.
all things gay in the last year, and it yeah, I've definitely noticed the I mean, it's not something I was attuned to prior, because though I was in queer spaces and with queer friends, it was a variety of different, trans folks and lesbians and gays and femmes and mask and whoever, and it was just, they were just people that were in generally my industry, in the travel industry, and there's a lot of gays in the travel industry.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so there was no particular group that I kind of gravitated to. They were friends of all types, and now that I'm out and, a gay man, looking
Mm.
at, what is out there in gay spaces, and yeah, I mean, there is this, I think, certain kind of toxicity that exists around body image, that's,
Yeah.
very, you know very toxic. There is, the mask for mask kind of
Yeah.
community that, again, is like also very toxic. But then there's all kinds of other groups that exist sort of around around that are incredibly welcoming and incredibly diverse and interesting and fun to be around. And, and I think a lot of that has to do with where you find that community. And, the
Yeah.
like, I put myself out there right away, and, started interacting with people on the different apps and stuff, because I figured that was probably one of the easiest ways just to start to engage with people. And, not to hook up in most cases. A lot of it was just, do you want to
Mm.
grab a cup of coffee? Do you want to go for a walk? And,
Yeah.
I've ended up meeting a lot of really cool people in my neighborhood. Some that have
Awesome.
now, as a result, like, been able to, they're part of other social groups that I've now been able to kind of participate in. So the dodgeball was a perfect example. That was through a guy that I
Yeah.
met on Scruff, who, is
Yeah. Yeah.
in dodgeball, and, saw that I was athletic and sporty and whatever. Athletic and sporty. And spend too
Yeah.
much time at the gym, I think, is what that means. And
Yeah.
he basically, he said, "Do you want to? Have you ever played dodgeball?" I was like, "Sure." I played dodgeball in high school and hated it because I was always the target. But I guess,
Yeah.
if it's all queer people, I guess we're just kind of reclaiming the trauma or something. So I was like, "Sure." So I joined that league, joined that team, which has been a great experience. Made, 20 new friends as a result. That now, we meet on regular, on Fridays to watch RuPaul. We have a
Yeah.
RuPaul, watch party on Fridays, it's kind of
Oh,
a regular
awesome.
event, and
Yeah.
we go to other kind of queer themed parties in town. There's a great space in Vancouver called the Birdhouse, which is owned and operated by queer and trans people,
Yeah.
and it holds almost exclusively only queer events,
Yeah.
which is for everyone, for lesbians, for Asian themed nights, for whatever cosplay nights, that all sorts of stuff, all queer themed. And so just being in those different spaces with all kinds of different queer people is has been really just so wonderful to experience, because you just get all different kinds of joy from people, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
the
so true.
I, everybody has their own, everybody's on their own journey, and everybody has their own experience. But what you see is that when they are in spaces where they can truly be themselves and just express themselves the way that they want without fear of ridicule or harassment or any of those things, it's like watching a flower bloom,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, it's so
it's
true.
beautiful to see. It
Yeah.
really is so enjoyable. And that's
Yeah.
mostly what I've been able to see, is both that from other people and that in myself, like being
Yeah.
able to go to a space and be able to wear something that I would never be able to wear
Yeah.
before, whether it's a jock strap and harness, or whether it's
Yeah.
some kind of I really enjoy wearing kilts and skirts, but with a masculine edge to them.
Yeah.
And that's something that I could never wear before, and now, I wear them all the time. And
Yeah.
it's so much fun to just be able to express that style in a way that is comfortable and feels safe for me now, right? Whereas I couldn't do
Yeah.
that. I couldn't have done that even a year ago.
Oh yeah. I 100% relate and know what you mean. Like when I look like back at my even like my past like photos and Instagram and everything, like I was always trying to follow the trends. And even in Madrid, when I was hitting the gym every day, I was probably at my most unhappy when I was going out every weekend and at my most buff, like I was super ripped. I had like the abs and everything because I was really trying to, meet those sort of guys, but it wasn't, I still felt a void and not happy. And then through COVID, obviously, well, I think like a lot of carrot cake and other things, like the gym went out the window. And since then, I found that not only do well, I love hiking, I love to, keep fit and focus on my fitness still, but I don't care the way that I used to in the sense of body image. I still have, yeah, body dysmorphia sometimes,
Mm. I
and
think that's something that so many gay men suffer with, we don't really talk about it much, but no,
yeah,
I definitely suffer from that too. But some of that is also from, I think, childhood trauma, having a parent who is very critical, very
yeah,
fat phobic and things like that. So, and I think we grow up with that too. It's just that
yeah.
trying to maintain that body image.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember for me, one of the comments that stuck the most was when I was around 12, 13. So I used to go with my father to deliver, like my first sort of job after school, delivering newspapers. And he would sit in the car and he would comment on my posture and how I walked
Mm,
a
hmm.
certain way. It wasn't manly enough. And our bonding thing was that we would go to Aikido, but I hated it. Like I wanted to be at the time, at the time I was finding my sexuality and I was not none of these things I liked, but the comments that he would make. And
Hmm.
even when one of the last conversations we had, um, before I sort of cut him out of my life, was like, let's have a conversation like man to man. And I said, these are the type of things that you've sort of put on me all my life. I said, you're not seeing me as the person. You've always put this image, this expectation, and I'm not going to meet it. And for my own sort of health and sanity going forward, I'm making the decision to step away from the relationship for my
Mm-hmm.
health. And since I did that, I've been very happy. And for me, my mom and my sister, because it's a long story, but in principle, my father left the family for he had an affair and left the family and went to Thailand, and then tried to come back and take the house from my mom.
Mm,
And it was like this battle, and I was already done with my father the day I left and flew to Madrid anyway.
mm,
But so with that battle, it was complicated for my mom and sister, but now the unit of me, my mom and sister are so open and so close. And I
mm-hmm.
don't it's like I and in my life here in Barcelona, I can wear what I want. I can be fully myself in work. And I know I can go to those queer spaces and be around people that just bring me joy and happiness and not feel the pressure that I felt in Madrid to fit
Mm,
a certain image from that toxic masculinity pressure that I felt from other people and myself. It's like it's all sort of released. I imagine
yes.
for you too, it's like that release is such, when you feel that, it's like the spark of dopamine. It's like a sugar rush,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that same way you get
Yeah.
a sugar rush after an ice cream or something.
Yeah. It's um I don't know if it's the dopamine necessarily. I think that, you know, there is a certain amount of dopamine involved, but I think it's more the serotonin, right? It's the longer
Yeah.
term kind of this sense of of peacefulness, of like long-term joy. Like the dopamine's a quick hit, right? Like that's what gets you
Yeah.
addicted to social media and to games and things like that. The and I prior to coming out, the dopamine hit on social media, like during COVID, like that validation from other people was something that I really
Mm,
craved, because I didn't have that long-term kind of serotonin hit that I was getting from the joy of being around people that I
mm,
really, so I substituted that with the dopamine, which I think was probably what caused the depression and the you know
yeah.
the mental angst that I was feeling for a number of years after that. And but since coming out, since, you know, being authentically myself and being able to spend the time that I want around people that bring me joy, that the serotonin levels I think have gone up. And just
Yeah.
like my baseline of happiness and joy in general is just so much higher. And
Yeah.
you know, I can spend time by myself and not feel lonely or not feel
Yeah.
sad that I'm alone. Like I cherish now my space. Like
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
my own space. I you know, I have it decorated the way that I want. It's, you know, kind of nerdy with my Star Wars stuff, but also kind of gay. And it's, you know, and I've
Awesome.
got my plants, and I'm happy, and that's great. And
Yeah.
so you know, I think we underrate and you know, we, society puts so much emphasis on that, on those quick, you know, fixes, on that dopamine hit, on that instant gratification. But it's the long-term sense of joy and satisfaction, and that long-term serotonin, you know, that I think is um, the ultimate result of being able to just be yourself and be authentic and to come out in that way. And for me, that has made, I feel like a, you know, a totally new, different person as a result, a much happier one, and one that, you know, wants to spend time and be more engaged with my family in a way that I never could before, in a way
Yeah.
that I felt I'd kind of neglected before. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, I think it's such a great story, and it's such a positive outlook because, it's like moving forward, like they get to see, the all these parts of you that you always wanted to share, or maybe you didn't know you wanted to even share at the time. And now it's like in this new chapter, it's, you get to include them in things that you probably, even a year ago, you thought, I don't know if I'll ever be able to include them in this. And
Hmm.
it brings such a, I imagine it's such an evolution of like not just the freedom, but the joy and just feeling that pressure like falling off and the support. I think it's such an inspiring story. It's such a lovely story to hear as well, because we often hear a lot of the conversely the negative stories, and I think
Hmm.
getting more of these really positive stories out there are so important. And yeah, when I read your post, like I think it was back in
Hmm.
January or February, and I really connected with it then. I thought it was, such an awesome story, and for a lot of people it's going to be very helpful and inspiring.
Well, I hope so. I mean, if I can, make someone else's journey a little better, a little more positive, then, you know, that's great.
Yeah, it's true. And it's like we always say we all grow at different rates and different times, but it's like, we very much, I think for both of us, we're in a place where we're in bloom right now and everything's, it's
Hmm.
not that,
Yeah.
and it's like for me personally, I go to bed at night feeling very content because there's nothing I'm holding back in any aspect of my life, because I'm so open with everyone in it about
Hmm.
everything from my queerness to my ADHD to there's I feel like there's no sort of secrets that before
Hmm.
I'd lie in bed and maybe I'd be just worrying over it could have been something very minor, but now it's like I sleep very peacefully.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I mentioned this to you before, but I'm definitely in my radical transparency era. So that,
Yeah,
I am happy to share my story with people when they ask, or even when they don't ask.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe sometimes it's TMI. I don't know, but um, I just feel like I hadn't told I hadn't told the whole story to
yeah,
either parts for so long. I feel
mm,
like now when I meet people, I just want them to know the whole story. And
yeah,
so they know what they're getting into when they have a conversation with me, like that this is who I am, and take it or leave it at that point.
yeah,
Because
definitely.
yeah, radical transparency combined with it is what it is. Like you can't
Yeah,
beat
it's
it.
so true. Yeah. No, I'm super happy for you, and it's been really amazing to have you on. Is there anything else that were that you feel like you want to say, or that I've missed that is part of your story that you would like to tell?
I don't think so. I think I've covered most of it. I think the last thing I would say is just be kind to each other.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day, just be kind to each other.
Yeah. Kindness goes so far. It's and it sets the tone for the day. If you
Hmm.
receive like one kind comment on even from the way to work, or a smile, like smiling at someone in the street, it can set the tone for their day as well. And I think if we all
Yeah,
practice that and go
absolutely.
from that place, like in the workplace and with everyone, then moving forward, it makes things, you know, that's the path we should be going towards.
Absolutely. I agree.
And yeah, so I wanted to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. And I wanted to thank everyone for tuning into today's episode of the Queerness Diaries. So, all the wonderful listeners out there. So, thank you so much, Stephen. And yeah, we will be back next week with another episode. But Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Connor. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, and ciao, guests. I'll see you next week.